Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Brisbane Planning Commission, Thursday, June 9th, 2016, 7:30 p.m., Brisbane City Hall, 50 Park Place, Brisbane. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Anderson?
Present.
Commissioner Doe?
Present.
Commissioner Manier?
Here.
Commissioner Parker?
Here.
The record show Commissioner Reinhardt is absent.
May I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
I motion to adopt the agenda of June 9th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Consent calendar. Please note, items listed here as consent calendar items are considered routine and will be acted upon collectively by one motion, adopting the Planning Department's recommendation unless a member of the public, the Commission, or its staff asks to remove an item to discuss it. Prior to the motion, the chairperson will ask if anyone wishes to remove an item. Does anyone wish to remove an item?
No.
Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the draft action minutes as presented?
I make a motion to approve.
Oh,
All-
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, wonderful. Oral communications. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the commission on an issue not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we'll move on to old business.
Written communication.
Excuse me?
Written communication is next.
Oh, yes, you're right. Written communications is next. We have an email from Ms. Claire Johnson regarding the intensity issues here. And we also have a printout of the FPPC conflicts of interest rules. Anything else we'd like to share?
You should have had a packet or letter from the Open Space and Ecology Committee.
That was in our packet.
Okay. It was written communication, though,
Yeah.
for the meeting.
Actually, I don't see it. I actually
This
don't
is the
have a
one,
copy
right?
of that.
That was the one, yes, the one that was in the packet,
The one that
okay.
was in the packet.
June 1st.
Okay,
I really appreciate that from Open Space and,
yeah, I think I received it as an email.
Ecology.
I didn't,
yeah.
but at any rate, we have that.
Okay, just want to make sure. Commissioner Anderson, do you have a copy, or
We
you do
have
not have a
I remember getting it as email.
Okay.
I remember email. What? Does that jog your memory? No, okay, because it was pretty long.
You
Okay,
did in conflicts of interest.
yeah, I mentioned that.
Yeah. Thank you. I realized that I had requested some information last meeting, so thank you very much.
Okay. So now on to old business. Baylands planning application, Baylands concept plans, Brisbane Baylands specific plan, general plan amendment case GP-01-06 and related final environmental impact report. Universal Paragon Corporation is the applicant. Owners are various. APN is various. Ongoing planning commission deliberations.
I'm going to turn the presentation over to Lloyd Zola.
Slightly different setup tonight. So,
Oh,
That's not working.
I know, I don't get to look at that to see whether I'm in the same place I think I am. So,
You can change your podium that way too, if you want.
okay, there we go. So just to first summarize things that you've already talked about and where we are in the process and layout where we'd like to go tonight. You've talked about basic principles for the development of the Baylands, the land uses that might be appropriate within the Baylands, a lot of the key features that start forming development areas and the features around which development needs to occur. We talked about the most appropriate use for each of the potential development areas based on those key site features. And then we've also talked about, or you've talked about, appropriate development intensity for a number of the areas. So that's kind of a summary of where you've been. We've talked also about an open space framework and the key features that to be preserved. And These are very consistent through each of the scenarios in the EIR, as well as the renewable energy alternative, preserving the lagoon and adjacent habitat, Ice House Hill, Visitation Creek. The open space area to the south is in the CPP scenarios, as well as the renewable energy scenario. And also, we've talked about the machinery and equipment area being looked at for major gardens. There was a question last time, or it came up, regarding the Bayshore Park that might be located between the extension north of Sierra Point Parkway and the freeway. And one of the reasons of having that 400 to 600 foot area as a park, besides us getting a better setting for the Bay Trail, is where Sierra Point Parkway would need to connect to Geneva at some point needs to be far west of the 101 freeway. So since we've got to get over to that point, rather than hugging the freeway and throwing the Bay Trail off the bay, the idea was create that buffer, and that gets a straighter shot rather than trying to get, the engineers would call it reversing curves coming up there, and it just seemed to be a better setting of creating that park, since there would be a trail. So that's the reason for that. Okay, so the basic question for this evening is, as we talk through development intensity for certain areas, and also met with a subcommittee of Commissioners Anderson and Parker to talk about questions that were remaining and how densities might really work. The question for this evening for the Commission is, what is the appropriate development intensity for really three portions of the Baylands? One being the Recology area, and that one you would actually, I had made a recommendation, and since then I want to talk about that one again. The renewable energy area, which is the landfill north of Visitation Creek, and then the transit-oriented development areas off of Geneva near on the west side of the rail. And anything we talk about tonight, or you talk about tonight, any direction you give is interim until you actually come to a final recommendation. So what we're trying to do is get some interim direction from you, so we can actually put together something that you would review as a more formal recommendation that you could then revise, change, do anything you want with before actually making a recommendation to the City Council. Okay, in the Recology area, this is really the area of Recology where they are now, going down south to what would be the alignment of the Geneva extension. I had suggested originally looking at 1,050,000 square feet of building area for that Area 1. The reason for that was that 1,050,000 was what Recology had talked about needing for their expansion. And so at 1,050,000 square feet, that would allow for the expansion of Recology, or if they did not expand, would give development potential to the uses that would fit there otherwise. In looking at that, though, and the concern that the subcommittee had, and I think one of the concerns the community has had, as well as the commission, is how much development total is being proposed in the Baylands, traffic impacts, air quality impacts, and so on. So as I thought about that area again, if Recology would not expand, if we went with that 1,050,000 square feet, Recology doesn't expand, that leaves a lot of development intensity for relatively small parcels outside of the existing Recology footprint. So I think it makes more sense to look at a lesser amount of square footage, something more like, I think I said like 585,000 square feet, that would allow for a reasonable development of those small parcels outside of the Recology footprint, some expansion of Recology, rather than creating about 400,000 square feet of density that only Recology might need, and could get you some development proposals on those smaller parcels that you really weren't looking for. So I think, we'll kind of run through all of these, and then I'll leave the dais and it's all yours. But yeah.
Just to be clear, the 585,000 square feet, that includes current and future uses.
Exactly. So there's about 400,000, 300, somewhere like that, of square footage of existing recology. So it allows for some recology expansion, and then basically you've talked about the balance of those parcels being light industrial. Pretty much it would be two-story buildings, 1 to 2 story light industrial buildings on the balance of that area. Something very similar to what you would be looking at along Industrial Way to replace those buildings, something a much more modern, low-intensity business park on some fairly small, tight parcels.
This 585,000 square feet, that number came from the ecology, or did you consult with them and see if that's what they have in mind?
No, this is not looking, this would be a square footage figure that would not account for recology expansion. So they would have some minor square footage for minor work that they could do, but for their major expansion, we would presume that they would come back to the city as part of their specific plan application, asking for an increase in development intensity to allow for their expansion.
Can you explain that again? What do you mean by
Okay, so right now, my New York relatives would love this, so use hands. So right now, there's about 400,000 square feet of building out there.
Mm-hmm.
The idea would be if recology does not expand their major expansion, what they want to do is go from about 400,000 or whatever to 1 million square feet, so more than double the amount of building area. That additional square footage is really only necessary if they do expand, which would be pursuant to an application they would bring along with a specific plan and so on. So the idea would be, let's start with recology has their 400-something thousand square feet, and there's a couple residual parcels, so we'd allow for development of those parcels and some minor expansion of the existing recology facility, leaving their major expansion to their application that they would be required to bring forward anyhow.
So then they have to ask to change the zoning from that to the ecology again?
So they would ask to increase the amount of development allowed in that area going down to Geneva from the 585,000 to 1,050,000, which would allow for their expansion. And since you're going, I thought that was a reasonable way to go because one, for their expansion, you're going to get an application anyhow. And two, it should be made clear that some 400,000 square feet is not there for the other parcels to take and use. It's there for recology. So there was just seemingly no sense of creating square footage for recology in the absence of their actual application.
Interesting.
Okay. The second area that we talked about and spent a good deal of time also at the subcommittee meeting is the renewable energy generation area. So this would be an area that you talked about as a commission would be, primary use would be generation of renewable energy. And the question that came up during your hearings was, yes, we want to see major generation of renewable energy, and at some point in the conversation, it had come up, well, maybe some level of development might be appropriate, even though the major use is still renewable energy. So the question for the commission this evening is, one, is your objective for that area still to maximize renewable energy generation? And I haven't heard anything that said that might change. But does that mean essentially the area would be a large, essentially solar farm, ground-mounted solar facilities, or would some level of development be appropriate within that area? Some level of development being potentially, we talked about at the last meeting, a tech campus that could cover a third, two-thirds, the entire area. It could be something that would be up and around the corner, retail, small office, but something just along the Geneva frontage. But really, that's the question for you, is are you looking for a large solar farm or some combination of solar farm and building? And the staff report lays out that alternative. So the idea is, as we talked about at your last meeting, if you would want to see a tech campus there, that campus could cover the entirety of the area, 2/3 of the area, or 1/3 of the area, or any portion thereof. You could say, we'd want to see a small area up at Geneva, or if your recommendation is just a solar farm, as you see in the renewable energy alternative, that is certainly a recommendation that you could, as a commission, make.
Also, this area is subject to where the Geneva Avenue is going to go, because right now it's not very certain that that's the location and that's the specific acreage you got there.
Right. So
So if it goes more towards southward, then you will have a reduction of the area there.
you would have a reduction of the area. The two areas being looked at, I think in high-speed rail, you saw in the notice of preparation, a portion of this area or to the west of the rail. So they have a study area that's much larger than their actual maintenance area would be, and they will study all of it and then decide where and what configuration a rail yard might have.
But we're
So,
not considering that in this particular case anyway, the rail yard. But the question here was solar farm. That's also flexible, that whole area, because we don't know the alignment of Geneva Avenue, where it's going to be, or whether it's going to be there, or whether we're going to even build it. So this area here, number 2, is the area of most interest to me because of the solar farm, and yet we're trying to compress that by putting some development next to the Geneva, the fictitious Geneva Avenue alignment.
correct. And in terms of, use the term flexibility, in terms of pure land use flexibility on what could be done 5, 10, 15, 20 years into the future, a solar farm provides much more flexibility in terms of what the rail authority might do. And if you, as a community, said at some point in the future, we would like to see some development up at Geneva, particularly if that becomes, I'll use the term tipping point, for dealing with location of the Caltrain station, you have that option in the future, whereas going the other way is more difficult, from development back to renewable energy. Okay. The last area was Area 6. This is,
Could you just repeat that again?
sure,
I just got,
okay.
my mind must have wandered for a second.
There's much more in terms of flexibility in long-term land use decisions.
Right.
There's more flexibility with saying this is a large solar farm, purely renewable energy, because saying it's renewable energy for the entirety would not preclude a decision later to say, yeah, we will accept, or we can go back and accept some level of development on that site.
So what he's suggesting at this point,
just
we can go
confused.
this as a solar farm.
Yeah.
Wait,
It might be a better option, according to...
I'm not suggesting what is a better option.
That's what you're implying.
Yeah.
okay. I admit, I'm still confused by that statement.
Okay.
So the flexibility, you're saying if we say it's just solar, then that provides more flexibility or less flexibility?
And the flexibility is, because one of the things that was mentioned is, I think at one of the commission meetings, well, what if we decide, depending on what the configuration of a rail yard may be, what, as a community, you might need to do in terms of adding development intensity in relation to location of Caltrain station. To say in a recommendation now, it is a renewable energy area, a solar farm, you could change your minds later to say, no, we could accept some level of development in such and such configuration. That's easier to do than to change your mind back, to say, yes, we agree with some development there now, and then take it away later.
Okay. All right. All right. Now I understand.
Okay.
There's also the possibility of including the Brisbane Bayview Park as part of the solar farm.
Well, yeah, and that's another option, is you could say what you would want to do is not have that park along the water, which would then mean that Sierra Point Parkway, as it extended north, would be essentially in the location it is now, right adjacent to the freeway, would stay adjacent to the freeway, and as it approaches Geneva and the intersection, it would swing west. So that's another option you would have, is to make that solar farm larger. I think it makes more sense to have that setback for a couple of reasons. One, it just makes, I think, for a better alignment of Sierra Point Parkway, but also there will be a bay trail there, and it gives a better setting to a bay trail as opposed to a trail that would then be, I've got the freeway, as I'm on the trail, I've got the freeway and Sierra Point Parkway on one side and a solar farm on the other. So that was the other reason for suggesting that.
Yeah. The other thing will be that we have to, in order to decide how much area that is, we have to figure it out how much kilowatt energy we want to produce. And based on that, it will determine the size of the farm.
It will determine the size of the farm, and I think it becomes a decision, not so much from the city saying, we want a farm that produces this much electricity, so much as it is an operator and builder of what makes economic sense for them to run. And what is their market? What can they serve? How much do they want to generate? What is the cost of doing it compared to their sales? But there's a very large economic issue that they will deal with.
Also, the San Mateo County is involved too because of the joint program that they have. So this area here will be subject to a lot of discussion in terms of the area itself.
Oh, yeah.
And how much area will be occupied by this particular zoning here.
Right. And again, I think in terms of flexibility, I think it will, my planner sense says flexibility works this way. If you show a park along the freeway and you come to a point that a larger renewable energy field is needed, you can actually make the solar energy farm larger by pushing Sierra Point Parkway easterly over to the freeway, as opposed to saying, okay, we're going to, well, I don't know. The flexibility can work either way. It's just, what do you as a community envision for that? I think that's the way to make the decision. Don't try and outguess how many acres of what we might need when there's lots of studies still to go. I would just, as a starting point, lay out, this is our preference, to see a park, or we don't care whether there's a park there or not, and then the economics and design of that area can then take its course.
Yeah. So may I suggest, if that's the case, then maybe we should not put any square footage number on that, because the thing is there are a lot of factors involved here, including the Geneva Avenue extension, and that may change more, go towards northerly or southerly. So as a result, all of these areas should not be considered a specific, acreage.
Correct.
Should be an area designated within this confine.
Right. So what we could do is then say, okay, and I'll presume what your recommendation might be, but you could say as a recommendation, we would like to see that park along the freeway, and we would like to see then Sierra Point Parkway pushed to the west. However, we also recognize that there's roadway design to go, determinations of the size of a solar field that needs to be done, and that alignment could change even to the exclusion of the park.
Yes.
So I'd leave the options open either way. So you would say along those lines, our preference would be to have that open area there, but we recognize that could be lost for a series of reasons. Okay. The third area is Area 6. We called it Area 6, which is the area west of Geneva, or west of the Caltrain tracks at Geneva. And this is the area that you had talked about in terms of designating it for research and development. That would be a R&D, Genentech type campus. You see those kind, Genentech kind of campus. You see also that kind of R&D campus a lot in San Diego because of their large biotech industry. So it is a combination of office-like buildings that are largely used as office, but include research labs and in some cases actually manufacturing facilities where they, particularly in the biotech industry, where they're manufacturing pills, assembling different things. The issue, though, and you also talked about allowing supporting commercial use, but limiting that retail use to something serving that area as opposed to a large retail area that would bring people in. So we want something that would be the kinds of retail that would support office-type, related employment. Restaurants, business support services, and those kinds of uses as opposed to a big shopping center. The other question that we talked about, and I came back with some ideas about, was when we got to development intensity. The graphics that we showed last time of buildings that were 3 to 5 stories were right about a little bit less than 4 million square feet of building for that area. And so I looked at various benchmarks to give you a starting point to talk about what feels right. The one thing I'll say is when you're dealing with development intensity, and one of the difficulties of this kind of large-scale planning is it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of what feels comfortable to you and what is the image you as a community want. So, and I'll lay out some of the benchmarks. 1 million square feet is similar to what was identified in the renewable energy plan. Over this 67 acres, 1 million square feet of building is basically 1 and 2 story buildings, and that is really, that style of 1 and 2 story buildings you haven't seen built in the Bay Area since the 70s and 80s. And that's because value of land is not supporting the 1 and 2 story buildings on a large scale. So while we talk about that on Industrial Way, you have basically small confined parcels. As we talk about that in and around Recology, again, you have small parcels that really push development down to that 1 and 2 story. When you have large areas, 50 acres or 40 to 50 acres and then 10 to 20 acres, so 67 acres is what you're working with here, that's really a very, very low development intensity over that large an area. And we haven't seen in the Bay Area that level of low intensity has been supported in the marketplace. Now, on the other hand, as the subcommittee talked about, one of the issues that you have struggled with and the community has talked a lot about is traffic. And the reality of our traffic situation is, regardless of what, if anything, is ever built on the Baylands, you will see some of the level of service thresholds and level of service criteria you have in your general plan. They will be exceeded. So you will not meet some of your level of service standards just because of development going on in Daly City and San Francisco and elsewhere. So that tends to push recommended density down because of just the traffic issues that you have to deal with. On the other hand, one of the objectives that you've talked about and has been important is the transit orientation and the Bayshore Caltrain station, getting something around the Bayshore station that is, in the sustainability framework, talks about a model of sustainability. But that tends to push to deal with the counter argument from San Francisco that says, and you saw the letter from the mayor of San Francisco, the Bayshore station ought to just move into San Francisco because we've got all that development up there and you ought to take all the low intensity uses. So part of the two objectives, that one pushing density down, dealing with traffic, one pushing development intensity up, which is a transit orientation, and trying to get a campus that will support not only vitality around the Bayshore Station, but as you heard Tim Kelly talk about in his presentation on economics, creating enough value that supports the basic infrastructure as well as remediation and so on. So those are the two objectives that push density down and tend to speak to higher intensity. Another benchmark we looked at was 2 million square feet, which is about 2 and 3 story buildings. So to give you an idea of how this relates to the four scenarios, to say that 2 million square feet of building within Area 6, that is about 1/3 of what the development being proposed, even in the community, in the CPP scenario. So that's still, it's comparable to what you see, 2 and 3 story building in some of the outlying areas of the Bay Area that you might see. I know I'm going to prejudice, but we'll just say the outlying areas of 2 and 3 story campuses over a fairly large area. It's kind of the style you see in suburban, as you get, I was going to use the term far out, but out towards the fringes of the Bay Area. At 3 million square feet, and we're talking about Area 6 being about 3 million square feet of ground area. So we're talking about a floor area ratio of about 1.0, 2 to 4 story buildings, a little bit taller. It's still far less than the CPP scenario, and that's typical of the low end of some transit-oriented development that you see in the Bay Area. Going to 4 million square feet, which is about 4 million is what was demonstrated at the last meeting. You might be looking at 3 to 6 story buildings. It's still less than half of what the applicant is proposing, and that's similar to a build out of what would be the lower intensity non-residential alternative. So one of the alternatives in the EIR. Or going to about 6 million square feet on that area, 4 to 8 story buildings, and which is really typical of what you see outside of San Francisco, but 6 million square feet in this area would be typical of what you see as transit-oriented development, the kinds of things that are being looked at along the extension of BART going south into San Jose. So those are just some of the benchmarks to think about as you start wrestling with this question of how much development is appropriate for that area. So those are the 3 decision points for you this evening, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Otherwise,
So 1 to 3 million is a non-TOD development, right?
it's less, yeah.
4 to 6 is.
I think 3 is where you start hitting something that starts getting to transit-oriented development. And the TOD issue in the Baylands is a little bit of an interesting one, because the letters that San Francisco wrote regarding location of the Caltrain station focused on how many people can walk to the station, and it's really, it also focuses on how many people can walk to the station from their home. So what the transit people would say, the first mile. As opposed to how many people can walk to the station to work, which would be the employment, or the other thing is with the Geneva extension and a bus rapid transit route coming down Geneva, that takes on a much more prominent role of the ability to tie areas that are in San Francisco and not located anywhere near the Caltrain station. Candlestick Point, Hunters Point, some of that development, Executive Park farther up, and get them via bus rapid transit, or even, I know in the Bay Area we don't like talking about driving to transit. This is my Southern California. Driving to a station, parking a car and getting on transit gives that opportunity, because you do have parking at the station which could be added to the south. So there is an argument to be made with the Geneva extension for actually being at Geneva having more access to people than pushing it onto, for example, the Schleglock site. So those are just some of the considerations, how much development you put right at it.
Also about the transit station, we really don't know the extent of the parking requirements. So that's another area that is within this scope of that, and that's an unknown too. So
And it's an unknown, and it's also something that parking requirement is,
because
kind of-
whatever we
yeah.
build, the BART station, any of those, not enough parking.
and some of that is also purposeful. The idea of not putting parking at a BART station as a means of getting people to take transit to BART. Although, as a visitor, when I drove my car to the Daly City station and I couldn't find parking, I just drove on to my meeting in Oakland. So,
But you've seen that it doesn't seem to work. People still drive to the BART station, and as a
exactly,
result, there's always a parking issue.
yeah.
And
And-
that has to be included in any of the studies here as to how much area will be occupied by the transit. That whole station you're talking about, multimodal station. So that may take a big chunk of the area.
Yeah, and one of the ideas that we looked at was the idea of using the existing parking area there right now.
Oh, that's,
You've got plenty of parking there, even though there's not that many spaces. But then as you go south, using the west side, west of Tunnel, going down as parking. So what you would have in that sliver of land coming down to Geneva could be used for parking as well as for the lumberyard to relocate to the west side. So those are just some things to think about. And we're not you should not be in a position of trying to design the Caltrain station for Caltrain, because ultimately their decision on how much parking to provide is not a technical engineering question so much as it is a policy question as to how much they want to, how much they're willing to pay for land for parking, and a whole lot of other issues.
the trouble is the whole development is tied to that, if you look at the transit-oriented development. So there has to be some kind of interaction between the two. And without that, how are you going to design it? you know?
The starting point for all of this is, what is it you as a city would like? And if what you want to see is station moved south, whether it's 300 feet, 500 feet, or all the way to Geneva, you would start with that, and first thing you'll hear back from them, then this is what we need. If you want that station here, then this is what you need to do for us.
Knowing the politics in the Bay Area, I think San Francisco will have the major voice than Brisbane. You know
Why you
that.
think that?
Yeah.
You know. It's the fact.
Well, and it works, and it does work ultimately two ways, even for San Francisco, because pushing the station north onto Schlegel Lock increases the number of people who can walk to the station, but decreases the number of people who can get there by transit, unless San Francisco Transportation does what the people in that neighborhood don't want done, which is to run transit through the neighborhoods to get to Schlegel Lock site, as opposed to doing what the people in those neighborhoods want to do, which would be take a much more direct route around. So I think even in that case, San Francisco has some very mixed objectives, because when you look at, for example, in the final EIR or the comments on the draft EIR, and this was interesting, there are comments from certain San Francisco departments that say you ought to reduce the density, do the renewable energy plan, take on high-speed rail, and we'll move the transit, the Caltrain station north, and everything will work. Then you also have comments from other San Francisco departments that say you need to increase the density in Brisbane because what you're proposing is not transit-oriented enough. So, it's part of the politics of the Bay Area. It's hard. different departments have different positions as opposed to the entirety. And the other thing that we point out in the final EIR is that the current study that shows the two options for the Caltrain station moving either 300 or 500 feet south was San Francisco Transportation Authority was the lead agency for that study. So the idea of moving south, not necessarily all the way to Geneva, came not just from Brisbane, but came out of a joint study that actually one of the San Francisco agencies was the lead on. So, any other questions?
Isn't it the part of JPB that decides all that?
sorry?
Joint Power Board is the one that decides the location of the stations and anything to do with Caltrans. But the problem I've seen is that the heavyweights like San Francisco, they dominate the JPB decision.
Yeah,
And
that's as you said, Bay Area politics. But yeah, it was interesting. City and County of San Francisco. I shouldn't say the city. The planning department went ahead with a study on, is it feasible to move it north? And that was a San Francisco study, not a Caltrain study. So ultimately, where it goes is where Caltrain puts its station is Caltrain's decision.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We are, I think at this point, we are supposed to be discussing this amongst the commission, right?
Yeah, I think I would prefer to have some discussion amongst ourselves first before opening to public commentary tonight.
Okay.
I have about 10 or 12 points that I want to make. Should be fairly brief.
That's fine.
Yeah. Do you want to get a comment card?
No, I just had a quick question about this.
Can you wait until the public comment session? Okay. So let's begin discussion. Go ahead.
All right,
12 points.
maybe 10.
Greg's 10 points.
So in 1994, Brisbane selected, mic picking me up? Brisbane selected a density of between 1 and 4 million square foot as appropriate amount of development for the Baylands. Now since then, traffic conditions that were driving those numbers have changed appreciably, so those numbers are not necessarily valid, or at least not for the reasons they were originally made. However, these changes that we're experiencing are not increasing the capacity of the site.
What, say?
What was the last?
I said that
I don't understand the last part.
traffic conditions are getting worse.
Right.
Worsening traffic conditions do not increase the capacity of the site. Their general plan defined the capacity of the site in terms of the traffic conditions that it can sustain.
So that means that with the increased traffic concern, the capacity should go down.
That would be the
There's an
logic.
inverse relationship between.
If we maintained
Yeah.
the same standards is in 1994 with worse traffic, then the capacity would go down.
So now it will be even less than recommended 1 to 4 millions. It will go down.
If we maintained the same reasoning.
Same reasoning.
We can
If we
always
had
we
the
can
same-
always change our minds, but I'm just saying, my point is in 1994,
Right.
the thought was 1 to 4 million square feet, and they had reasons for that.
Got it.
And we can say, for changing conditions, our reasons are different. But that's our starting point, 1 to 4 million. Now, furthermore, the land conditions with the toxicity and liquefaction, which are a poor combination, those are an even stronger reason to limit density. We can always change our mind, but, the expected land use was set in 1994, so anything above that is beyond expectations. Therefore, I think that we should be looking at a total density of the site in the 1 to 4 million square feet range, distributed across the whole site, not just in Area 6. So Area 6 density should be 1 to 4 million square feet minus whatever else we put everywhere else. And we're going to have to come up with different reasons for our density, since the 1994 density justifications are no longer valid. Also, given that we would like to recommend a net energy positive site, it makes sense to put more density in Area 6 and leave areas like other areas like Area 2 largely open. You know, while it's technically possible to put something under the solar farm, that would be contrary to the goal of being net energy positive, since development can't typically satisfy its own energy needs with on-site energy generation. Now, HSR might be an exception to that, but you know, we are not going out seeking HSR. That is something that may be thrust upon us. So I think it makes sense to say that, you know, if we are forced to take HSR, then we could put that underneath the solar farm as a concession, and we wouldn't necessarily need to reduce our density if we were going with a low density option. Now, if for some reason City Council decided that they wanted to recommend 12 million square feet and HSR came in on that plan, then of course you'd have to cut it down a lot.
For the people at the audience or at home, can you just spell out HSR? What is that?
Oh, the high-speed rail.
Yeah, so at least they can figure out what you're talking about.
Right. So next point.
That's point number one.
It's high speed.
Oh, no. I didn't number my points. I'm more than halfway through.
Okay. I just was wondering where we were in the points.
I could go back and number them if you want.
No.
I thought you said you weren't organized. Anyway.
I just wanted to know.
Okay. So,
Or what you can do is just print us that copy of that.
okay, I'll number it and email it to you.
No, I thought we were going to discuss things.
We're going to discuss.
Okay.
Then going back to something that Jamil said earlier, I think that the solar farm could extend into Area 3. Now, in the last minutes, I was quoted as saying that solar was not necessarily compatible with open space, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't. You know, we'd have to look at how those areas could be compatible, you know, whether or not they are. But I think that boundary between 2 and 3 is adjustable, although, you know, you'd have to leave a gap for Visitation Creek.
Okay.
And now I'm pretty much at the end here.
You don't have to rush now.
I don't want to take too much time. So if we build under these levels, you know, in the 1 to 4 million square feet range, that'll probably take 20 plus years to build. Then if we give it another number of decades of observation, that'll give us some idea of how the land is holding up. And at that point in time, it might be possible to increase the density, especially if we see things like an extension of BART, or 101 could become multi-tiered. You know, you saw that.
Are you saying that we should put in there a recommendation that we are open to an expansion of the density in the next 20 years?
No, I was thinking more in the next 15.
It's just
In the next
discussion.
15 years?
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that right now, we do not have the public transportation or freeway level, and we don't really know what the liquefaction susceptible land is going to do. So, you know, maybe in the farther future that might be adjusted, but today I would not want to recommend that. And finally, we've been experiencing a lot of demand for housing and a lot of people who are saying that we need to increase the density a lot because there's a great need, because, you know, we're filling in. And there's a lot of arguments in favor of infill. However, we are also experiencing essentially exponential growth, where growth is proportional to what is here. And in the short term, we have little hope of keeping things affordable, and in the long term, we can't possibly keep up. So I feel that under those circumstances, we should concentrate on building in places where it's appropriate for building, and leave places that are more difficult to build, such as the Baylands, at lower density. So those are my...
Okay, my take on this is that we started out with the EIR that was submitted to us. There was one concept plan, the others were supposed to be specific plan, but it turned out that they are not the one. So the premises for our discussion from the very beginning was whether we're going to certify that particular EIR or not. And since that, we have deviated completely. This whole idea of this area 1 through 6 was not even the current EIR. And this density, development intensity criteria, or whatever we're discussing, that should be part of the separate EIR altogether, because that's not we were called upon when we got this big EIR from the very beginning.
The EIR has to be certified for some particular use.
The EIR was supposed to be certified for the uses that were mentioned in that EIR. They were.
I thought we could have a hybrid and see if it would somehow, then we could ask for parts of it look like it was being, the EIR addressed those, and some parts they did not.
No, the thing is, it's going to change, and this is a totally different plan than what was presented in the EIR. This was not discussed.
Well, I didn't like any of those
The plan,
plans, so.
it's land.
No, the plans that were
Okay.
that were in the EIR.
I think,
Well, I think as we've
Clarify.
talked about, the EIR discussed a mix of land uses distributed across the site in various ways at intensities at or greater than what you're currently discussing. So the question or the observation or the assertion that something that's being proposed or been discussed in your deliberations is outside the scope of the EIR, staff doesn't believe that's an accurate
Well, the thing is,
characterization.
John, if you look at it, we were given the EIR based on 5 alternates, right? And we had to figure out whether, based on that, the EIR was sufficiently detailed, cover all the aspects of the impacts.
I think the way the question, and Lloyd can get into this in more detail, the question is almost the reverse. The question is, when you come up with a land use program that you're interested in recommending to the council, the question is whether that EIR adequately addresses that land use program. It's not relevant to, if you're not interested in approving or recommending 12 million square feet, then the question of if the EIR is adequate for analyzing 12 million square feet of development is not a recommendation you need to make to the city council. And I turn over to legal counsel for further elaboration on this point.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Director Swicki just said, is essentially that the first step is there a project, is there a recommendation that the commission is interested in making to the city council? And at that point, the question is whether the EIR adequately analyzes that recommendation. It's not a more generic question of whether the EIR adequately analyzes sort of any recommendation that could possibly be made. The issue is whether it analyzes the one that you are interested in making, which is why staff has continued to recommend the first step is to come up with a land use program. And at that point, staff will look at that and recommend to you whether, and come up with a recommendation as to whether the EIR is adequate to analyze that. So that is...
That's not the way I have seen any of the EIR studies in my life. The EIR study, when they submit the alternatives, you have to look at the alternatives and say whether the EIR addresses all the concerns, environmental related concerns. Based on that, you certify that EIR, okay? Whatever was presented in the EIR document. Now, this was not presented in the EIR document. So if I had to certify that particular EIR, I cannot, because it's not the same as this. This is a new land use. So in order to certify this particular land use, I need a separate EIR. Am I correct or not? Because otherwise, what's the purpose of EIR and specifying any particular project? We completely changed the EIR scenario, and we're saying that we're going to certify that EIR.
Okay.
We can't, in my opinion.
Well, and I'll start by saying you may be correct in terms of, does the EIR, the final EIR that's on the table right now, address, the question as legal counsel said is, does the EIR adequately address the recommendation you're willing to make? And the answer is no. Let me get to that, and I'll loop back around. In any general plan, in any specific plan that I've ever been involved in, and even in most projects, it comes down to the end where you have an EIR that a city council or a board of supervisors will look at a general plan, look at a large scale, any kind of development, and say, we recommend approval of this general plan, or we're going to approve the general plan with the following changes to it. Almost never, in fact, in only one or two times have I seen a council actually adopt a large-scale general plan or a large-scale project, what was actually in the EIR. So if you look at and go back into EIRs, you will find that 80-something% of them or more, the project as approved is somewhat different than the project description in the EIR. And the reason for that is something that once happened at one county where an applicant went in and in the middle of, as part of public hearings on a large project, said, I would like to see a change on my property. And the chairman of the planning committee, actually was the chairman of the board of supervisors, said, nope, we're not going to consider that because the EIR does not have that land use on that plan. And he had a very simple comment to make, and that is, then what in the world are you holding public hearings for, asking me what I think of this plan if you cannot adopt anything that's in the EIR? The point is that an EIR is an informational document to support a land use decision. If your ultimate decision is to say, we recommend denial of the applications and we do nothing more, you do not need to certify that EIR. You could simply say, we recommend denial, we're not certifying anything. If you look at building, if you look at, well, we'll take the next, approving or recommending approval of one of the scenarios, one of the alternatives in that EIR, you can do that, and then you ask the question, does the EIR adequately address the scenario or the alternative we wish to recommend approval of, which is the very same question that council will ultimately have to make. Whether your recommendation is the DSP scenario, the CPP scenario, or the alternative, or one of the alternatives like the renewable energy alternative. If you look at all of the alternatives and all of the scenarios, and you say, we don't like, as Commissioner Parker said, I don't particularly like any of them. I would like to see changes in them, and I would like to recommend, and now I'm going beyond what Commissioner Parker said, but I would like to recommend this as a plan, whatever it is, whatever changes to any of the scenarios. Your question is the very same one you're raising right now. Does this EIR adequately address that alternative or that scenario? Because one of the options that you as a commission have, that the city council has, is to look at, for example, the DSP scenario and say, we recommend approval of that, however, we want the density reduced by 20%. And I've seen commissions and councils do that for the 40 years I've been in planning. That is a very typical outcome. Recommend approval with a lower density. We recommend approval with these changes in conditions. We recommend approval with the land use in this area different. And so it becomes incumbent then, if you have a recommendation or if council has a action that they want to take that's different than any of these, we need to come back, and you as a commission and then council needs to make the determination to answer the question that Commissioner Munir is asking. Does this EIR adequately address that option? In some cases, Your answer may be yes. In other cases, as I saw in one general plan, they said no and directed the EIR to be revised and recirculated. That is your option in your recommendation, but the land use, the EIR follows the land use, not the other way around. The EIR is an informational document. So you start with, this is a recommendation we want to make. Does the EIR give us the information we need to make that? And if the answer is yes, you would have findings and recommend certification of the EIR. If the answer is no, as Commissioner Manier is suggesting, you would say, here is a land use we would like to approve. We recommend approval of this land use. We also recommend that you redo the EIR, address that land use recommendation, and essentially go through a second round of draft and final EIR. So that's how you would structure this.
Yeah, the other aspect of that is that in order to certify this particular EIR, you also have to look at all the alternatives that were considered. And one of the alternate that was missing, in my opinion, was, again, the high-speed rail. And if it's not there, that also generates the issue that whether the EIR is complete or not.
Okay. And that, again, is part of, and you as the commission get to make whatever recommendation it is you want to make. So you start with, and all I'm suggesting is start with, this is the recommendation we want to make. If you believe that all of the alternatives and everything there should have, however you think high-speed rail should be handled in a recommendation, you just say it, and then as you get to do we recommend certification of the EIR, depending on your feelings on high-speed rail, you say yes, you recommend certification, or one of your recommendations could be, we believe the EIR should not be certified because we should go back and analyze another alternative.
And there is also the aspect of whether the analysis that was done was complete, because there was a lot of concern about not adequate information about the hazardous material, for example, and also uncertainty with the water uses and all of that, where the water is going to come from. There are a number of things that are still missing in the EIR that need to be analyzed and addressed. And you are asking us to, at this point, approve this particular land use. I have a difficulty doing that unless I get those things analyzed and also given the some kind of a result as to what's going to be.
So,
like in the absence of water, how can I even do this?
So, the way that you would frame that recommendation, then it becomes the decision of what do the rest of you want to do. If the argument you're making is you want to see things done to the EIR, revised in the EIR before making any land use recommendation.
Right.
If that is the recommendation of the commission, then that would be the recommendation. I mean, you could send on a recommendation to the council that say, we recommend taking no action on anything. We want to see these revisions to the EIR before we recommend any land use. I mean, that is one of the options you would have.
Yeah, unless we go with the idea that the renewable energy doesn't have any of those concerns, like traffic and, the hazardous material and all of that. In that respect, that particular alternate can be the one that can be suggested.
Your choice on recommendation.
Yeah, I'm just discussing this so the other commissioners also start thinking as to which way we're going to go here.
That would still require an EIR, though, so any specific plan is going to require that. So the question here, I think we were whispering to each other, is like sort of like the chicken and the egg question. So right now, we have a project that the EIR is currently based on. If you push it down, if you push the timeline down further, you're going to have increasing issues that arise. There's never going to be a perfect EIR, and that's why the certification can be made with recommendations for modifications, hence what Commissioner Parker was saying, that she was thinking of hybrid modifications, and I think we were all working towards that. So I think that if we look at it from another vantage point, that is that We have something that is a starting point. It can always be modified and rectified to make it more closer to our vision, but we need to work with what our vision is and not be constrained by the limitations right now. We will worry about figuring out how to deal with those limitations when we do the final recommendation, which is not at this stage.
Well, if that's okay, but the thing is, if we want to decide only the land use, what will be the land use in this particular parcel, then that's okay. Once we decided that this is what we want in that parcel, then based on that, we do the EIR, then we certify the EIR, but the current EIR, we cannot certify because it's totally different. And that was my concern. And
I
and
think that's
also-
what we
also the
decided
land-
we wanted to do a long time ago.
Also, the land use, we have to decide whether we're going to go the land use that we have discussed here, or we're going to go with the land use that the other alternates are suggesting, for example, renewable energy. They are suggesting that solar farm and certain amount of industrial. commercial.
What you're saying is that we have to go back and look at all these plans, but I think what we're doing is we're putting together a plan that the Planning Commission feels would be appropriate to the needs of Brisbane. And then we can look at the EIR and
Yes.
see if the EIR has the potential to be certified based on this new hybrid plan. And if we do that, then we can see which parts that we want additional study, and then we can make a recommendation and send it to the council. I think that's what we're trying to do.
And also the thing is there are a number of
you have-
issues.
Yeah, but
Number of issues that need further investigation, as the large number of
but what I think I, as a commissioner, would like to do is to try to come up with a plan that the commission feels would adequately represent what we feel that the Baylands should be for Brisbane, and and work and then work around that, and then figure what else needs to be studied.
So it would be an add-on. It wouldn't. It
It would be an add-on.
Yes.
And then we can decide whether we want to certify the EIR.
If that was not the assignment we were.
I think that was the assignment we
No,
decided
the
on.
assignment was given to review the EIR and make the changes to the general plan.
But that's
We were not
what
given the
happened.
assignments to come up with a totally different scenario. But if you're looking at the intensity and development intensity, for example, and
You're the chair.
if that was our assignment, then I say, yes, that's fine. Let's do that and then ask for a new EIR.
So I am in agreement with Commissioner Parker that I feel that the assignment has always been that we're working with what we have, and then we come up with the vision, and then we modify to fit that vision as best we can. So I am in agreement with Commissioner Parker, and I think that if we take that point of view, which is the actual assignment, our assignment as the commission, I think we will be much more productive as we move forward.
Yeah, I also agree, but I do think that there are some important points that you're making. And, to clarify, I'd like to recap something that Lloyd said at a previous meeting, and that is that, we could certify some portion of the EIR is adequate for some use. For example, traffic study is adequate for 1 million square foot of use, but for 6 million square feet of use, we would need more study. So I think that in order to avoid going around and around in circles about land use certification, we need to make some reasonable assumptions, recommend land uses, and then, not all tonight, but in subsequent meetings, go over the EIR and figure out which sections of it are adequate for the land use that we're recommending, and, then from there it'll go to council.
But the thing is, the EIR itself, when we were reviewing it, we found out that there were a lot of information still missing.
Yes.
And that has
I
to-
I do not agree with that. I agree with that.
Okay, so in order to
but I'd
do,
like-
in order to do anything, first of all, we have to address those issues those things that are missing.
But
That
can we
has
do
to
that after?
No, before, in order to certify, you need to figure out what areas or what issues are not resolved. So for example, traffic issue is still not completely resolved. You know, 1 million may not be enough to possible to bring the service level down or reasonable figure. Also the issue of transit-oriented development or transit center, that's also kind of up in the air. There's not much.
But don't you think it's more productive as a commission to decide what would be a good land use and then go back and look at the document and see if we can work with it?
I don't disagree with you,
good.
definitely. But that,
like that.
That's what
we're working
That's what
on.
we should have done from the very beginning.
But that's what we were
But the thing
doing.
is, the EIR really confused me and everybody else, that this is the EIR we need to certify, and in that one, there were 4 or 5 alternates were given, and they said, this is the presentation that we have, and this is our EIR, are you going to certify or not? We cannot certify the way EIR is. We may be able to certify certain portions of it, but not the whole EIR.
Well, then that's what we're saying, is that we can certify
but
certain portions of it.
That's not exactly what we were told from the very beginning.
But actually,
anyhow,
I think what we do from.
But anyhow,
Right.
what I will suggest,
Should we take a vote or something about what to do next?
what I will suggest is this. I think what we should do is figure out, first of all, the areas that need further studies. Maybe make a list of that. Listen to me first. You know, that based on the testimony of the people and also the, some of concerns that we brought up, these areas, the areas where the EIR lacks, for example, the water supply. We need some better information about the water supply, where it's going to come, and any kind of a particular document. Then we can say that the EIR, this issue is properly addressed. Same thing with the traffic, same thing with the air quality. For example, the air quality, there were a number of issues that I still have that they were not analyzed. And I was going to bring this up, that this should be analyzed to make sure that we are on the same track, that it's definitely not going to have any air quality impact.
Okay, can I make 2 points
Yeah.
before you list everything in the EIR? I think those are good points, and we do need to make that list, but I think that each item on that list needs to be in reference to some land use recommendation.
Okay,
And
that's possible, yeah. We can do that, but again.
That's actually
But
necessary.
then again, we cannot certify the EIR the way it is.
We're not
Right, so
certifying,
that's-
we're
right.
not,
We have to recommend that they should come back with the further study, and then we will certify the EIR.
Right, and my second point is that a land use recommendation can't turn into an approval without a certified EIR,
Right.
so why don't we do it the way staff is suggesting?
And basically, the way that you would, I'll try and take lots of pieces that I've heard and lay this out as a suggestion. So what you would say is that we would recommend approval of this land use package. However, before that land use package could be approved, we want to, and the EIR could be certified for that land use package, we want to see an updated traffic study, updated air quality information, better information on water supply, and whatever else you want to put in a list as to what would need to be done with the EIR before the EIR should be certified for that land use. Because if you want an updated traffic study, the very first question I would ask, and the traffic people ask, is, and what land use is it you want me to study? So we can't because if all you did was say, go back and study or update the study for the scenarios we have, it's not going to help you for whatever land use you want to end up with. So the idea would be to identify, this is, as some of you are talking about, the land use package we want to see, and before you update the EIR, or certify the EIR and adopt that land use package. We want these studies updated, bring it back to us in a package, and then we'll study the traffic effects, the air quality effects, greenhouse gas effects, water supply for all of these issues related to that land use we would like to see ultimately approved. That's the structure of how to get.
That sounds like a reasonable approach. And the way we were going before is that certified the EIR. I didn't like that idea. I think that the EIR has to be done after we decide the land use package. So, so the current EIR is not certifiable until we decide on this.
Okay, are we ready to move on and figure out what we as a commission want
Sure.
for this land to be?
Sure.
Yes.
And then we can decide on whether we want more study of the EIR based on our land.
That's fine,
Oh, good.
Okay.
Well done.
because I wanted to clarify my
Okay,
point that
I
we
understand.
don't want to certify the EIR. Okay?
Good.
I hope I clarify it. I don't know.
Understood.
Do we want a break?
Okay, so Commissioner Parkin would like to have a break, so let's take a 5-minute break and come back. See you in 5 minutes.
Good. Maybe a tiny bit. Okay.
Welcome back. So, continuing with the discussion, we're going to start talking more about the intensity, land use intensity concepts for the three areas that were identified. Recology area, the renewable energy generation area, and the transit-oriented development areas. So Commissioner Parker, do you want to start?
No.
No?
I suppose I could. I took very seriously the idea of just maybe keeping the renewable energy as renewable energy without anything else. What do the rest of you three feel?
I'd like to explore more conversation about the possibility of other light industrial or tech campus or something else that supports renewable energy in that area.
Did you want me to restate my opinion on that? Everyone is looking at me.
No?
Okay.
You don't want me to start again.
I think we discussed your thoughts.
Okay, the renewable energy there, you want to keep it the way it is, right? The whole area not allowing any
Just
industrial.
procedurally, can I just interrupt for a minute? So we're skipping 1 and talking about 2 first. Is that how we want to do it?
I thought so.
Okay, that
Skipping
works
what?
for me. That's fine.
Fine.
It doesn't
Skip
matter.
one and
There's
go to
no-
number 2?
Yeah.
Well, I was asked to start, so I thought
No,
maybe.
no,
we
no,
could
that's
start
fine.
with that.
Whichever you're comfortable. We can start with 2. Okay, would you like to continue?
Okay, I'll say something about that. I guess everybody is quiet. What I will say is the renewable energy in area number 2 should be kept for that particular use, you know. I don't like to mix with other stuff in there. And secondly, it should be the area should be determined based on 2 criteria. Number 1, the specific location of the Geneva Avenue, which we don't know. Secondly, the need for the energy, how much we're going to generate. And so based on that, it can move north or south or east or west. Also, I like the idea of Brisbane Bay View Park. I think that's a good idea. And but we should not take anything out of the area too for any other purpose, because the thing is, there is a dire need of generating a lot of energy, and I think San Mateo County and other cities are also joining forces to come up with a joint policy on that renewable energy. So that will be my take on this. I don't know about
Mr. Anderson?
Oh, yes, I agree. I think that we should be looking at an energy positive project over the entire site.
Right.
And I think that keeping an area dedicated to solar is necessary for that.
and wind power too, in case.
Anything else to add, Commissioner Parker?
I think that we shouldn't, I think we should just make that the priority. And I think if we say, and then we can add this or we can add that, then that maybe takes away from the priority.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think before, and when we were discussing Area 2, I had said something about wanting to keep that as part open space as well. So I really like the idea of the Brisbane Bayview Park idea, and I like what Lloyd was saying earlier, and I think we all agree, is that it's better to leave it open, and then when the future, the vision as we move forward in the future changes and or shifts, we can always go back as opposed to vice versa. So I think those are the two big winning points for me. So I am in agreement that I think that's 110 acres, right, Lloyd?
That will,
plus
that will
acres?
vary.
It was huge, right, or around that area. I was just trying to envision it.
I'm trying to remember. I'll check.
Yeah,
I think 110 is
yeah,
correct.
I think that was, yeah,
110, but then you take away the park.
right, but as,
Minus the park,
Minus-
so it's
Right,
smaller.
right.
But
So
that
that
whole
would be,
space.
yeah.
yeah. And then the way it's situated on the other side of the freeway, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. So that will make it really aesthetically pleasing, open and useful for everyone, as well as energy positive. So I'm in agreement with that.
Also, it improves the visual impact from the freeway also. You don't want to see all
The what,
those.
I'm sorry?
It also improves the visual
That's what I was saying,
thing from
aesthetic
the
value.
freeway.
Yeah, the aesthetic
Because the
value.
thing is, otherwise you will see all these panels. So
Yeah.
that makes sense also.
It makes a lot of,
And also, I will say that we shouldn't call that a solar farm only. We should call it the renewable energy rather
Agreed.
than solar farm, because there might be some, wind turbine.
or other sources, right?
Other
Renewable
sources.
energy,
So
whatever they may be in the
You
future.
can remove the word solar farm from there.
So I think that was just an option. So we make it renewable energy. With room for the open space, the park. So are we in agreement for area 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a go. Great. So who would like to do area 6 and 1? Commissioner Rainier?
Transit-oriented area, I have a lot of concerns with that particular area because the transit is nowhere in the site. And it may take a number of years, I probably won't be around before they build the multimodal station over there, knowing the current fiscal situation here, where BART is trying to get the money to fix their cars. They are already outdated and all that, and they're trying to put the bond measure in order to get a reasonable transit station over there. We're looking at a number of years, and I don't know whether it will even be possible to do it. Secondly, the reason, even if we get the transit station over there, the Caltrain service is very inefficient. It's not as fast as BART, because BART runs on an automatic train control system. This one will be still slow, even though they're electrifying it, but it's going to be slow, and I don't think there will be a capacity to accommodate that much growth, because in order to accommodate that much growth, they need to have so many, a lot of cars, lot of locomotives have to be there.
Can I step in and can you go back and talk about what the growth is?
The growth with the Hunters Point, the San Francisco,
the growth of
yeah.
other areas.
So all of that, in order to support that, you will need a very efficient transit system, and I don't think the electrifying of the Caltrain will do that. It's not possible, in my opinion. We're working on those projects for a number of years with JPB. I know that how long it takes to decide just one issue. This is a major expense here, And if you look at the current study now, even BART has mentioned that the transit-oriented communities are not helping BART, because what's happening is that everybody is on that bandwagon, and they expect BART to provide all that, and they can't. There's no capacity there. The area is not the same as New York or Washington or those areas where they have the New York specifically in Boston, where they have the number of underground trains going back and forth that can accommodate all those people there. But in this area here, first of all, we're talking about edge surface service. Edge surface service means they have to go through each and every city to convince them make underpass or overpass. And each underpass and overpass cost close to $30-40 million. Cities don't want to do that. I spent several years trying to convince many cities. So Burlingame, for example, still not agreed to provide underpass or overpass. If they're not going to have the underpass and overpass, then forget about high-speed rail, because if high-speed rail cannot work when there is an at-grade crossing. It has to be totally separated, like BART. So the idea of transit-oriented development is good if we have these systems in place, or there is any forecast for that within 10 years or 15 years we have that system in place, and we'll have the adequate capacity to accommodate all the traffic, all the people using that, considering all the surrounding areas, you know. We don't have that at this point. So the concept is very good. Everybody is on that bandwagon, but we don't have the resources, nor we have any time frame as to when it's going to be done. And the Caltrain system itself is not BART. If you have a BART type of system, high speed, that's a different thing. So transit-oriented development areas, I like the idea to have that, but I would not put very, very high density stuff there, because it's not going to serve that purpose.
So in terms of determining the maximum allowable development intensity, which is our issue at hand, what would you recommend? Maybe the slide on development intensity benchmarks for TOD area might be useful in terms of using that as the basis for our discussion. The one here.
It's right up there.
Okay. I mean, I certainly will not go for high density, you know. I certainly will not go for 4 million square feet or 6 million square feet. Okay. I think if you want to keep it, probably, it's very hard for me to decide at this point. I cannot figure it out because
Lower
there are said lower the better, but I think there are a lot of uncertainties regarding the transit itself, you know.
Right, so if you give us a range, that would be helpful. So let's
I
say
will-
anything
I will-
under 3 million?
Can I maybe point out that the lowest option on this list of 1 million square feet is much higher than the Krebel plan? Not to say that that has to be the upper limit, but I just know that you had quoted that in the past, or, you know, Krebel's recommending 1 million square feet across the entire site.
That seems to be more reasonable to me than 1 million for one sub-area.
Every area, right.
Every area, right. And
So
and I
then
think
that can be something that you can use as your benchmark.
yeah, I think our decision should be based on what we want the density of the entire site to be, and 6 should take the bulk and the remainder.
So the
Doing
key
exactly-
question will be for entire site, right? How much we want for the entire site. And residential is, we already agreed that there's not going to be any residential. So based on that, we have to decide light industry, campuses, commercial. Those are the 3 options we have. Industrial. These are the only options we have.
Was there a clarification, Lloyd?
Oh, yeah, I was just, on the Krebel plan, they had 1 million square feet, but the differences were, I'm presuming that 1 million square feet was not the Recology expansion?
Right, not
Recology is 1 million all by
ecology,
itself.
but otherwise.
Right,
across.
and that 1 million square feet was really only for the only place they showed development was the Roundhouse and this area. It did not have the development along Industrial Way. That was shown as open space.
Right.
So basically, the 1 million square feet is right about, that benchmark is right about what the Krebel plan is.
If we don't put anything else in other areas.
Right, and so essentially the revisions that you've talked about so far
Yeah.
to the Krebel plan were adding the industrial along Industrial Way, keeping that in place. And after that, it's really just a comparison of, you know, these benchmark. I would just compare these benchmarks to 1 million square feet, because we've already made that exception on Industrial Way.
I remember your recommendation for Area 5 last time was pretty low density, but you don't have it listed here. Could you refresh our
I think it
memory?
was,
about-
Yeah, that was, you know, in and around the Roundhouse.
Oh, it's in the,
yeah.
okay. That's one
I
with, like,
think, yeah, on G,
150s
Yeah,
or something?
G.1.15, the roundhouse maximum was 184,690 square feet of building area would be.
Okay, well, that's negligible.
Yeah. So I think Lloyd is correct in saying that we've already made the exception.
Yeah, so the two essential revisions that you've talked about with the, to the renewable energy alternative is to add Area 4, which is the industrial way, to add that 180-something thousand square feet around the roundhouse. And so the question that you have now is, for that last remaining area, what would be the appropriate development intensity?
In this area 6, correct?
Yes.
Can you put that big picture here with all the, if possible, with all the areas?
It's on your packet, G.1.15.
Yeah, I guess, but I thought it would be easier to see.
Yeah. So everybody can look to that
Yeah,
page
no.
there.
Yeah,
I
the
don't think
last
they have a slide of it.
The last page of the attachment is the land use, and now we're going to go back and there you are.
Yeah, that's for the benefit of people watching at home also, because they don't know what we're talking about, so.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
Do you see it?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so that will be useful too. So in terms of determining the maximum allowable development intensity for Area 6, what would be your comfort zone?
I don't know at this point. Because
Fair? That's
I have
fair.
a lot of questions in my mind before I determine.
Do you have a cap though? For sure, you said not 4 million and not 6 million.
Right.
So we have that. Is that okay with everyone? Not 4 or 6 million. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I-
so,
I would think that we might recommend 1 to 2 million with the possibility of more with further study.
that sounds fair.
Yeah.
That's reasonable as well. Yes?
I guess
Because
as
for
I
sure
said,
we've
I'm still-
eliminated 2 of the 5. Commissioner Parker, is that okay? 1 to 2 with a possible higher
to 3.
expansion if,
Yeah.
with further study.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, I think that's agreed.
Okay, so we have the recology area.
Okay. So now we are
Ecology.
Ecology area, Area 1. So again, a maximum of 1 million, well, Lloyd already addressed that. The recommendation is now 585,000 square feet rather than the 1 million square feet.
Right, and there's already 400,000 square feet there, so we're looking at
Exactly.
another 100,000 some bump, and I think overall I like the concept.
Yes, and also the fact that the Ecology would have to come before the commission anyway with this new application if indeed it wants to expand further, and for how much, correct?
The thing is, for ecology itself, for that facility is that 585, but there is other areas there too, because, to retain the existing, but what about the other areas that are part of, the total area is, what is the total area for one?
1,050 square feet?
Were you talking about
1,050 square
acreage?
feet?
Or acreage? or-
Acreage is 59.7 acres.
So
Again, it's
the-
on
so the
G.1.15.
So what we have to decide here is ecology will take a certain part of it, rest of it, what kind of
Right.
density
And
we
then
want.
this is what would be left
I
over,
correct?
is the 585 square feet.
Yeah.
After ecology,
The remaining
Yeah.
one.
No,
Right.
Is that on?
no?
no. I
Okay.
think it's,
There's about, Recology is 200, if I remember correctly, about, Brad's sitting right there, about 200-something thousand square feet of building. There's some other buildings in there. So you have about 400,000 square feet of existing buildings. This would allow an increase of about another 185,000. So that would allow some, give Recology flexibility on their existing facility, would provide for buildings on the other parcels in that area, and then at such time as Recology came forward with their large-scale expansion, they could bring that application to you.
Yeah, my question I had was that ecology, 585,000 square feet you're recommending. What's the remaining area?
Oh, the remaining is about 185. Recology and the existing buildings right now are about 400,000.
So the total area is 500, what is the total area?
You have about you've got Recology with certain buildings, other buildings, so there's about 400,000 square feet of total building area right now, including Recology. The concept would be allowing an expansion of existing buildings or new buildings up to 585,000 square feet for that area.
So that will be for the entire area?
For the entire area, yes. And then if Recology had their expansion wanting to take their particular facility, physically expand it and get up to 1 million square feet, they would bring that application to you.
I like that much more than the million.
So 585 seems to be more
Reasonable,
reasonable than 1 million.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 585,000 reflects the existing Recology condition plus the other parcels there, as opposed to reflecting the 1,050,000, which was the Recology expansion.
So with this 585,000 square feet that Recology occupies that will be minus from the total of area 1, right? The area 1 will be now 585,000 square feet?
No, my proposal is we look at the total capacity of this.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Not including the 400,000.
Which would be
That's already there.
585
Already there.
square feet.
Yeah,
Is the
so
left
it would be
field
like
after the ecology.
185,000 less, plus the Area 4 area, plus the.
Right.
So that 585,000 square feet, what we going to put there? What kind of density we will have there?
Well, 400,000 of that square foot is already built.
Yeah. So rest of it.
Let me lay out what this would be. So what you would be saying, and we'll start with the recommendation you just made on area 6. So, and I'll see if I got that right. 1 to 2 million square feet with the potential of going to 3 based upon further study. If that would be, let's just say 3 million because I know this one right off. So if that were with the additional study went to 3 million, including Recology area, including Industrial Way, including the Roundhouse area would be about another 1 million square feet. So if you say 1 to 2, potentially going to 3 on that transit area, it would be 2 to 3, potentially with further study going to 4 on the entirety of the Baylands.
Well, actually, and
And
others
then
may have different opinions, but I was thinking 1 to 2 million for the entire site. So, we're only taking out 100,000 here and 100,000 there and putting the bulk of it in Area 1. So pretty
Okay,
close to
so-
what you said.
Yeah.
And I would rather not list a number with
With the area?
further study, just, stick with our recommendation and not speculate.
Okay, so let's just as you're building this, so if 1 to 2 million was the entirety of the Baylands, at 1 million square feet for the entirety of the Baylands, if you assume then the existing buildings at Recology,
I said for the entire area exclusive of what's already been built.
okay. Okay.
Minus that,
Yeah.
that's not counted in there.
So Industrial Way already,
Industrial Way is about another
built,
230,000.
and then
Yeah, so that's different.
Then the Recology is already.
ecology's already been built.
So about 800, so you would count then, it'd be 1 to 2 million, maybe going to 3 with an additional 800,000. That would be
Already
Right.
built.
actually an additional 600,000, which would be the existing buildings at Recology and the existing Industrial Way.
Yeah, except, other opinions aside, I would rather not give that number 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just say
I think the one
It
to
could be
2
1 or
million.
2 million, and then, if there was further
It could
study,
be
we might,
anywhere in between.
yeah, I mean,
I think that was correct for me as well. Is that so for you, commissioners? Manira and Parker?
I think I'm in agreement with Greg that we should set up a limit for the entire site rather than,
Yeah,
and,
so I think we agree that it applies to the entire site,
yeah.
exclusive of what's already
Right,
been
already
determined,
already there.
as exceptions.
The lumberyard and all that is already
Right.
there.
and/or
Yeah.
have been determined otherwise.
So the maximum allowable for the entire site is 1 to 2 million. That's what you're saying, right?
With room for,
potential.
yeah, with
for-
room,
With potential for 3, maybe.
room for increase if,
Because
There's
the
further
general
study.
plan
would rather not say
is-
3 million, though.
no, we don't need to set a number, to be whatever it is. Was that clear? Sorry. Okay. Okay.
Because I did write the notes, and I'm going to put, so 1 to 2 million, and the way I wrote it down was 1 to 2 million for the Baylands, and essentially 1 to 2 million new square feet of
Right.
building.
And I don't really know what's in Area 2 right now, except for the lumberyard, which we previously decided was pretty small, so, I mean, hopefully I'm not
Yeah.
Yeah.
overstepping my bounds here.
I've got that included,
No.
so essentially it would be, let me say it this way, a net increase of building area on the Baylands of 1 to 2 million square feet.
I think the net increase captures it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was what I intended, but if Area 2 is more built out than I expected, then I hope I'm not
Well,
overreaching. But
but that, we've already made an exception for that by saying exclusive of anything that's already currently there or built, right? This is net increase.
Yeah, but we also care about what the total capacity is going to be afterwards.
Right, we do. But I think by saying it that way, it will, it responds to that.
No, it doesn't respond to that, but
No, I mean, like, it includes that. No?
No?
Because the net increase is for anything in addition to, not already, anything that's already pre-existing.
correct.
Right, so
That
we've,
means that means that our total square footage for the Baylands is, 1 to 2 million plus unknown, and I'm assuming that unknown is small, not significantly large.
well, yeah, I think
There's
we had
not-
said negligible earlier, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was just saying that I'm under the assumption right now that Area 2 is fairly negligible, and if
Yeah.
I'm wrong about that, then
But
No,
you're,
I think, is that true?
Well-
Are we going to, what I want to know is what's already in Recology, are we going to add that in? Because that is not part of the Baylands.
yeah, I was saying not counting that.
Yeah,
So-
let's
Right.
not count
Wondered
So-
Recology.
That's why I'm saying, yeah, if we look at, and this is the reason I've been so clear about saying, any direction you give is interim till all this comes back. So what
Right.
we would come back with then, and then we can, as we talked about, discuss the EIR at your next meeting, would be a 1 to 2 million net increase in square footage. I would identify for you coming back, this is the existing square footage of buildings on the site, Recology, those smaller buildings, south of Beatty, Industrial Way, and you would have essentially something that would look like a table that would say, this is the existing building square footage on the site, this is the net increase,
But-
this would be total.
I thought we already agreed that we were not going to include Recology because Recology owns
Yeah,
that portion of the Baylands. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that was.
Correct. And that's
Okay,
why-
I just wanted to make sure.
That's why, because I
Yeah,
want to make sure
okay.
of two things.
Right.
One, if we're talking about net increase, we don't accidentally put net increase as the total amount of development in the general plan. All of a sudden, you find out, we say 1 to 2 million, only 800,000 or whatever the number is already on the ground.
Well, yeah, then.
So-
Okay, and that's the question, is everything in Area 2 relocatable? You showed that triangular area where the lumberyard could move across the way. Does everything similarly fit?
Yeah. I mean,
Do you know how much is built in Area 2 right now already?
I'll have to go back and it's changed. So what we'll do is if your direction for the moment, just say for the moment, is 1 to 2 million net increase, I'll show you 1 to 2 million net increase, plus this is the existing building area, would give you this total for the Baylands.
Yeah, that'd be good to look at.
That'd be great.
And that's what we'll bring back as
Okay.
part of, okay, now we'll discuss environmental issues at the next one based on this land use. So we have a land use pattern, we've got a total amount of square feet for the entirety of the Baylands, and then you could look at the EIR in that context.
And that would address the unknown negligible question that we were, okay, that would be.
You know, Lloyd, I will make a comment here. If you had to do this all over again, this whole process, I would have liked to do this first. What we did here, the land use, decide, because that has nothing to do with the EIR results. It's basically a concept as what we want to put in what areas. And once we had that, then if you would have done the EIR, it would have made a lot more sense, you know? We just went the wrong way, in my opinion. The EIR, we looked at it, all of those numbers and all that should have been catered to what the final approval is here in terms of the development area. It would have made my life a lot easier. I mean, I totally confused still as to what I had to approve and what I don't have to approve, you know?
The answer for your recommendation, you don't have to approve anything. You can make whatever recommendation.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it would have been a lot easier for all of us if you were to ask us to come up with this, what intensity you want and what the final plan is. Then you go back to the developer and say, okay, if he's interested, come up with the EIR for that. Then we will have a specific EIR for that particular project. We will be much happier.
I don't know if this is
Easier.
the time to discuss, but I really don't know that I could make decisions without having understood the EIR first.
I tend
yeah.
to have that position as well.
You know, I don't know whether the EIR, what aspect of EIR we are using here to come up with these areas. We are not,
Density.
But,
what aspect we are using here.
okay.
I think we're okay with that conversation, and
Yeah,
it's
we
been had.
probably-
So,
I'm,
We are not using any aspect of this
know,
EIR to
but-
decide
so
this.
I think we've had that discussion, yeah? So we're done with all the key points to be determined tonight, yes? And I think that we wanted to address any public comments that we had as part of our open dialogue tradition. So, again, we've already had the public hearing, so everything from the public has been collected, and you can still continue to provide public comment via email and/or written communications to the planning department. But if you want to speak tonight, please remember that because public hearing has been closed and we are in deliberations, that we are opening up this public comment section in order to increase open dialogue, but at the same time not to be redundant and/or debate and/or questioning and deliberations at this point. And if you would like to speak, please limit yourself to 3 minutes, and you would need to fill out a speaker card. I have one here already. Does anyone else have any other comments they'd like to make tonight in the 3-minute mark? No? Okay. Mr. Jonathan Scharfman, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jonathan Scharfman with Universal Paragon. My primary comments tonight were going to be geared toward the letter in your packet that was submitted by the Open Space and Ecology Committee on comments on land use for the Baylands. But before I do, I do want to just point out that the recommendations that you just made or are considering for a maximum of 2 million additional square feet on the Baylands site, roughly on the 540 acres of the site that are not the lagoon, translates to about 4,000 square foot of development per acre. So please keep in mind the initial charge of economic feasibility for this project that was in the 3 legs of sustainability, economic sustainability being one of them. A few meetings ago, the Kaiser Marston did conclude that the cost for infrastructure remediation and site improvements, including the parks that are desired on the site, stand at approximately $3.67 million per acre, as I recall, with a maximum value for commercial development of $4 million an acre, less than that for some of the other uses. So I just ask for the record that those analyses are complete before any final decisions are made, because it seems to me that you might be recommending a density that, in combination with the infrastructure required to support these large park and open space areas, may not be feasible. Turning to some comments on the Open Space and Ecology Committee letter that was submitted today, I'll just, we note several factual errors and misleading statements in this letter that we want to see highlighted for the record, and I'll just introduce a few of those, and because we only saw these today, we'll be preparing some comments with a letter next week. Number one, on page 1 in the introductory comments, there are some rather loose statements about the developer-sponsored plan and variants exposing Brisbane residents to toxics. As we've said before, we believe that's a misleading statement. We've heard it in statements to this commission, and we are seeing it in this letter. And to imply that residents would be exposed to toxics by building housing on the Baylands is really, it's misleading, and it ignores the state standards that are set for cleanup of these sites. And as we've said before, the state sets the standards, and they're followed by any developers that might build housing on a site like this. Number two, and this is also happening at the commission level, but we'll mention it in relation to this letter. The OSEC on page 1 in introductory comments does appear to be misinformed regarding the high-speed rail, looking for a maintenance facility in terms of there being a stop, and concluding that there might somehow, by having a maintenance facility, be a stop on the site. There will be no transportation hub on the Brisbane Baylands if there's a high-speed rail in this location. So hub implies access to other modes of transit, and so it's just important to consider that that in order for transit hubs to be viable, they really do need to be next to jobs and housing centers. Number 3.
Can you repeat this again?
There, again, on the introductory page of the Open Space and Ecology letter, on the third paragraph, they're talking about a high-speed rail hub as a likely location, and at the Brisbane Baylands, as well as a multimodal transit hub. And again, our concern in the definition here is that these actually are mutually exclusive uses. High-speed rail would, by its nature, not create opportunity for a transportation hub on the Baylands. It would preclude that. And again, we're confused as to why there's a recommendation at this commission or by the Open Space and Ecology Committee for any inclusion of high-speed rail facilities on this site. It's simply not part of our application. Our next comment regarding health and happiness, in the next section of what was addressed in the OSEC letter, on the bottom of the second page, it claims that the developer is sponsoring the Community Proposed Plan, or the AEP, which I think is an acronym for Alternative Energy Plan, that I guess is the also known as the CREBL Plan. We just want to make sure that for the record, it's noted that we are not a sponsor of that plan. Furthermore, the committee letter specifically states a concern about residents living in close proximity to Caltrain. That is on the next page, on the top, and we just again find this to be a misleading statement and inconsistent with current national, state, and regional best practices that do encourage building residential uses near transit to increase walkability, transit access, reduce single occupancy vehicle use, and greenhouse gas emissions. Again, I'll remind you, your own EIR for this project proposal had significantly lower greenhouse gas emission results in those analyses for the DSP than even for the CPP, and that logic is following current national and state policy in this area. We respect that people have different opinions on the matter, and particularly I understand, Mr. Munir, that you have your own on this matter about how these policies are set and the efficacy of these transit systems and their improvements. But these are the tools that set for the measurement of greenhouse gas emission reductions and how that happens. And they do conclude that high density development around transit reduces greenhouse gas emissions or provides a great opportunity to do that. Pardon me for going over, I'm just about finished. There are a number of examples across the United States and locally that demonstrate former rail yards can be remediated for housing. Again, we respect the opinions of the OSEC. Some speakers who have repeatedly stated their opinions here, as well as some of commissioners. But it's simply to ignore that in close proximity to this site in Mission Bay, there are thousands of people living without any health risk at Mission Bay. Sacramento at the former rail yards at Mission Bay. Sacramento as well, the former rail yards have been redeveloped, and there's housing in those areas, is simply to ignore the national and state patterns in this area. There's a recommendation around remediation of the site to OSEC recommends restoring the wetlands on the Brisbane site to pre-industrial levels. Since the Brisbane Baylands was formerly tidal flats and the bay, it's unclear to us what this recommendation entails, as the restoration and creation of wetlands across the entire site to pre-industrial levels would obviate all other proposed uses, including OSEC's AEP recommendation. And finally, regarding sustainable transportation, it seems to there's recommendation that that there should be some amount of investment in rehabilitation of the Bayshore Station for Caltrain under OSEC's AEP recommendation, which is by the way, fairly consistent with the recommendation that you appear to be making for Area 2 this evening. And I'll just remind you that without density around transit, there will be little increase in ridership. No incentive to expand an already underused transit stop into a major transit hub. And there will simply not be financing available in the priorities that are set for state investment in these areas. So Again, while we respect the OSEC's opinions on these matters, we just ask that the commission just take a pragmatic look at the causal relationship between density and land use and the ability to get transportation investment that's going to take more single occupancy vehicles off the road and reduce greenhouse gas emissions as a result. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So moving on to items initiated by the staff.
I thought Barbara wanted to say something.
She decided not to fill out a form.
Yeah, I had a question. I think I've got my answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, there was the Parkside study session at the city council last week, so there was a interesting dialogue, and that work program will be moving forward, and go through a process when it's a little further advanced, where that will be coming before the Planning Commission in a study session and formal public hearing formats. Nothing scheduled in the immediate future, but if you didn't have the opportunity to attend, I'd certainly encourage you to watch the study session and review the materials that were presented as part of that, and they're on the city's website. On the documents page of the Parkside web page through the city. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And that's all I have. Oh, scheduling, I think a couple things. One is our next regularly scheduled meeting is June 23rd. And I think, as was discussed previously, the council has overscheduled us for the July 14th date because of their schedule. So we're going to have to move our July 14th regularly scheduled meeting, and want to check your availability for July 7th.
You got my note regarding me being out in June.
You'll be out for June 23rd.
Yes. So whether you can answer tonight, or you can certainly email us as to availability for that date. Subsequently, that would be fine, but we will have to reschedule our regularly scheduled July 14th meeting. If you want to look at an alternative date, the week of July 10th, that's maybe a little challenging.
Well, let's do one after that, so that if July 14th not available, we can go to the next week, next Thursday.
You're proposing July 11th, 21?
Yeah, something like
That
that.
would also be a planning,
Yeah,
No, councils,
the council meeting.
yeah, because it's
event.
alternate.
council won't be meeting.
So
Then
we
can go
need to
2
look,
weeks from there.
They're meeting on.
or we could look at,
That would be
So,
a
yeah, we
regular
could be back
scheduled
by the-
meeting.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking at that too.
So we can go to the next Thursday,
oh, you
One
mean in
o'clock.
August?
One.
huh?
End of July. 28th of July, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, that's our regular meeting.
Yeah,
our regular
when
meeting.
it is regular,
One meeting is
within the next
canceled.
week, yeah.
Well, that's,
Cancel one meeting, because
That's
that will
right.
give us a
Well-
gap in, anyway.
I mean, it's a bit of a challenge to work in this Baylands process and other business we have pending, but, if the commission is not available for a special meeting, we won't hold a special meeting, so.
I'm okay with that date.
We got too many special meetings. We bought-
No, I'm
The
okay,
7th.
yeah.
So Commissioner Parker's okay with the 7th. I'm okay with the 7th.
7th of
I'm okay
July?
with the 7th. I
And
think I
so-
sent email with my schedule previously.
We could confirm, but if that's,
Yeah.
So the
7th
three of us
July?
are okay with the 7th.
I'm
I'm
okay with
okay
that.
too.
Okay, so all four of us are
Okay.
okay.
and
There
we'll
you go.
confirm with Commissioner Reinhardt.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay,
That would be great.
that's all I have.
Okay. Do we have any items initiated by the commission?
Yes, I don't remember the gentleman who came to our subcommittee meeting. He presented us with some information. Is he going to come speak to us? We asked him not to present to the subcommittee, but we requested that he speak to the,
Just for the benefit of the full commission, A
I
few
don't
meetings
remember.
ago, C-Clear, the Center for Creative Land Recycling, they're a nonprofit that their business is, or their mission is to encourage brownfield reuse. And they had presented at the end of one of your meetings, maybe a month ago, and there were some specific questions that had been raised about long-term efficacy of remediation, sites that have been remediated over time.
It was older than 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had done some research, and
They claim to have
I would suggest we put that in the form of information that's available, made available in writing, as a,
That would be great.
okay, we can do that.
Because he came up with a few locations.
I don't know why they would call it that. That's what they.
Okay.
Okay. So, can I have a motion to adjourn to our regular meeting of June 23rd?
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn to our regular meeting of June
23rd.
At 7:30.
7:30 PM sharp.
We have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. See you then.